the second issue of Video Game Battle with yours truly, where I take two games, compare them with each other, and decide at the end which do I think is the superior game, whether the games have similarities to each other, or just comparing an original game to its sequel. So, for tonight's installment, let's bring out the competitors! Crash Bandicoot the original versus Spyro the Dragon the original. Now before you start, yes, I do know GexUp did compare these two games as well when he did his Naughty Dog vs Insomniac game series, but I myself have been wanting to do this for a long time now, comparing two games that I played in my childhood and that got me into being both a Crash and Spyro fan. And remember, this is all opinion based, not facts, therefore you're free to have your own as well. All you have to do is just respect what I have to say. Now, I'm not going to talk about what these games are because I already made reviews on them, so check those out. In the meantime, I will compare these two games in 5 categories: story, design, music, bosses, and gameplay. So instead of mumbling around, let's begin this battle! Let's kick off with the story. Well, both games feature short and simple stories that no one needs to give a crap about. Crash's story involves the evil scientist Dr. Neocortex mutating a Bandicoot named Crash as his minion, only for the experiment to fail and Crash escapes Cortex's castle, leaving him to stop Dr. Cortex and save his girlfriend Tawna. Spyro's story involves the evil nasty Nork overhearing the dragons insulting him, which makes him mad and trap every single dragon in Crystal except for Spyro, leaving Spyro to free all the dragons and defeat Nasty once and for all. This one's a little tricky for me, but if I was forced to pick which story is better, I'd say Spyro's story. The reason is because Spyro's plot did have more backstory and cutscenes than Crash's story did, plus the ending of Spyro was something worth a damn, while Crash's ending just had Crash and Tawna hugging each other, falling in love, blah 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 blah. Still, even so, both games just feature typical platformer stories, so moving on. Now the next category, designs. We're not just talking about the visuals, we're talking about the imagination and the good sense of feeling that both of these games have. Crash's levels are themed after jungle, temple, laboratory, and any other kind of levels you'd expect in a wacky game like this. My favourite level in the game is the Road to Nowhere level. Even to this day, this level gives me a warm feeling every time I play it. Another favourite level of mine is the Generator Room level. This is probably the darkest level in the entire game. Everything in the background is pitch black and only the platforms are your light to escape. Spyro's levels on the other hand differs a lot from Crash's designs. Spyro's levels are themed after anything fantasy or fairy tale related, like fields, castles, deserts, caves, mountains, swamps, and so much more. Looking at the designs of both of these games, I say Crash's designs look more appealing to look at. Though I'm not saying Spyro's designs are unappealing, most of the levels in Spyro did offer a lot of vibrant colours and a good taste of adventure, but then there are other levels like Terrace Village that feel depressing to go through. So in the end, Crash Bandicoot definitely has the superior designs. Now on to the next category, music. What both Crash 1 and Spyro 1 have in common is that they are well known for having catchy and memorable soundtracks. Crash's soundtrack has peaceful jungle music, whereas Spyro's music takes a more fantasy and atmospheric tone to it. Now, if you've seen my Crash Bandicoot review, you should already know I stated that I think Spyro's soundtrack is superior. The reason is, Spyro's soundtrack really did focus more on the level's settings and atmosphere. Sure, I will admit, Crash's soundtrack did have a few catchy tunes to it, but there were a couple of forgettable tunes as well that didn't really appeal to me much. To me, Spyro's music was more creative and more memorable than Crash's. One song I did find unappealing in Spyro, however, was the Terrace Village level. I will admit, I hated the music in this level. but at the same time it doesn't kill the whole soundtrack for me, so Spyro wins the music category. Okay, boss battle wise, Crash 1 and Spyro 1 have never really been known for the bosses. Crash 1's bosses are mutated Looney Tune-ish like characters. To defeat each boss you have to repeat the pattern of when the boss is going to attack you and when he will expose his weak spot. Spyro's bosses, you don't really have to avoid the boss's attacks or wait for him to show their weak spot. All you do is just do the best you can and attack the boss with force. To be honest, both of the bosses in both games are not that memorable to me, but I have to go with Crash Bandicoot's bosses, mainly because the bosses are more challenging and more interesting. Spyro's bosses are just pathetic! Seriously, these are the weakest bosses I've seen in a platformer so far. The only boss in the game that I did feel that was challenging was the robot boss, Metalhead. Other than that though, the bosses are really poorly done. And here's a little spoiler, that the final boss, Nasty Nork, is also a joke. All you do is chase Nasty until you get to a suitable spot to attack him, then repeat the same process twice. Honestly, would you even call this a boss fight?
Honestly, that's like I've got to chase this £20 note in order to get it. Come here, you! Got it! Got it!
Yeah, well, granted the boss fight with Cortex wasn't that great, but compared to Nasty Nork and Spyro, it is amazing! So Crash Bandicoot wins here. And now we reach the final category, gameplay. Whoever wins this category will declare the victor of tonight's installment. Let's start with Crash Bandicoot. Well, in Crash Bandicoot there are two main objectives. Get from point A to point B and obtain gems and keys by smashing all the boxes in each level. The game also has 2D levels, so you don't need to go through 3D levels all the time. There are also levels where you have to escape a rolling boulder, Indiana Jones style, and levels where you ride on a wild boar. Like I said in my review, getting all the gems 100% can be very frustrating, but worth the challenge. However, the bonus levels were more tedious. And since this game was released at the time when CD-ROMs didn't have save features, saving in Crash 1 requires completing the bonus levels. The controls on Crash are a little stiff when jumping from platform to platform, but it doesn't make the game unplayable, so that's at least a good thing. Spyro's gameplay does involve collecting gems like in Crash Bandicoot, but the main collectibles in the game are releasing dragons from their statues and listening to them say their message. The controls for Spyro feel more smoother and comfortable, making the game easy to pick up and play. I have to admit though, aside from the underwhelming boss fights, there are other flaws I need to discuss about this game. For one, the game can get a bit repetitive when releasing the dragons. As I stated in my review of the game, there are 34 levels which can lead to mediocrity into releasing the dragons all the time. Also, I hate having to listen to these dragons say, "Thank you for releasing me!" all the time. It gets old and annoying. But that's not my biggest complaint about Spyro 1. My biggest complaint about Spyro 1 is how the game is just too easy at times. I'm not saying easy games are bad, it's just that there's a lot in the game that could have been more of a challenge, but sadly, no. I know a lot of people say Spyro 2 is easy, but it is a challenge compared to this game. Now there were some parts in Spyro 1 that were tricky, like the treetops level and the Misty Bog level, but other than that, this is the easiest Spyro game in the trilogy. So now, my final thoughts on which game do I think is better. It would be Crash Bandicoot, the original, in my opinion, is a little bit better than Spyro the Dragon, the original. I know that many of my friends out there who know me as a Spyro fan are actually surprised at this, but let me explain. To me, Crash Bandicoot was more fast-paced and had more platforming and challenge. Spyro the Dragon, I still really like this game, but to be honest, I don't love it as much as I used to as a kid. Sure, it was the game that got me into the series, but looking at the flaws of the game now, I'd say the sequels were more better. But still, I like this game and I always will. It's just I think the game focused too much on collecting things than actual platforming, and it was a little slow paced. And to all Spyro fans out there who are upset about my decision, I can still respect you guys if you like Spyro 1 over Crash 1, just as long as you respect mine. And just because I like Crash 1 over Spyro 1 does not mean I think Crash is better than Spyro altogether. Well everybody, that wraps up the second installment of Video Game Battle. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see yous in the next video.